What if the greatest treasures of ancient civilizations weren't meant to be seen at all? Picture this: beneath the shifting dunes of forgotten deserts, hidden beneath layers of sand and time, lie some of history's most sophisticated timekeeping devices, deliberately buried, their secrets locked away for centuries. These weren't just tools to mark the hours. They were sacred objects, wrapped in mystery, their very existence tied to beliefs so profound that displaying them openly was unthinkable. Today, we're unraveling the enigma of the timekeepers of the sand, those buried clocks that whisper stories of cultures who saw time itself as something too powerful, too sacred, to be left in the open. Think about the clocks we know today: grand towers, elegant wristwatches, even the glowing screens that keep us tethered to the modern world. Now, imagine the opposite: a society so reverent of time's passage that they hid their most advanced clocks away, as if protecting a divine secret. Why would ancient civilizations go to such lengths to conceal these marvels? Was it fear, worship, or something even deeper? The answers lie in the shadows of history, where religion, power, and taboo intertwine to shape the fate of these extraordinary devices. From the deserts of Egypt to the ruins of Mesopotamia, these buried timekeepers hold clues to a world utterly foreign to our own. This isn't just a story about ancient technology. It's a journey into the minds of the people who created it. As we dig deeper, you'll discover how these clocks were more than instruments. They were bridges between the earthly and the divine, tools meant to commune with the gods rather than merely organize human affairs. Some were buried to protect their power from the unworthy, others to shield their creators from the very forces they sought to measure. By the end of this exploration, you'll see these artifacts not as forgotten relics, but as keys to understanding how ancient civilizations grappled with the greatest mystery of all, time itself. So let's begin, because the sands are shifting and the truth is waiting to be uncovered. For the ancient Egyptians, time wasn't just a series of moments to be counted. It was the heartbeat of the universe, a divine rhythm pulsing through every aspect of life. Their calendar didn't just track days, it synchronized with the flooding of the Nile, the movements of the stars, and the cycles of their gods. Ra, the sun god, didn't simply rise and set. He sailed across the sky in a celestial boat, battling chaos each night to ensure dawn would come again. This wasn't mere mythology, it was a framework that shaped everything from farming to pharaonic rule. The same reverence echoed in Mesopotamia, where celestial omens dictated the fate of kings, and in Mesoamerica, where the Mayans wove time into sacred calendars so precise they still astonish astronomers today. But why keep such profound knowledge hidden? Imagine a society where understanding time meant wielding power over the very fabric of existence. Priests who could predict eclipses or solstices didn't just tell time, they spoke the language of the gods. These secrets were too potent to share. In Egypt, water clocks used in temple rituals weren't just tools, they were conduits for divine communication, their inner workings guarded like state secrets. The Mayans inscribed their astronomical wisdom into codices so sacred that later rulers buried them beneath pyramids, ensuring only the worthy could access their wisdom. This wasn't superstition, it was a deliberate choice to protect knowledge that could unravel the cosmos if misused. The deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes. These buried clocks were never meant to be utilitarian. A sundial in the marketplace might mark the hours for merchants, but the true timekeepers, the intricate bronze mechanisms, the star-aligned stone circles, were entombed because they served a higher purpose. They weren't measuring minutes, they were mapping eternity. When archaeologists uncover these devices in tombs or sealed chambers, They're not finding broken tools, they're discovering prayers cast in metal and stone, silent hymns to the sacred cycle of creation itself. This celestial secrecy wasn't just about control, though. There's something hauntingly beautiful in the idea that these civilizations saw time as too sacred to reduce to mere numbers. To bury a clock was to acknowledge its power, to humble oneself before forces greater than any human invention. Modern atomic clocks might tick with flawless precision, but they'll never carry the weight of a device crafted not just to count moments, but to commune with the infinite. That's the true mystery of the buried timekeepers, not how they worked, but why their creators believed they deserved to rest in darkness, waiting for an age that might finally understand their silence. One of the most striking examples of these hidden timekeepers emerged from the depths of the Mediterranean, the Antikythera mechanism, a corroded bronze device pulled from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. At first glance, it resembled little more than a lump of metal, but beneath the grime lay gears of staggering precision, arranged to predict celestial events with uncanny accuracy. This wasn't just a clock, it was a portable cosmos, a machine that mapped the dance of planets and the timing of eclipses. Yet it wasn't displayed in a public square or a scholar's study. It was lost at sea, as if its creators had sent it away to keep its secrets safe. Equally intriguing are the sundials found tucked into Egyptian tombs, their surfaces etched with markings that aligned with the sun's path through the underworld. These weren't tools for the living, they were guides for the dead, ensuring the departed could navigate eternity. In Mesopotamia, water clocks were buried beneath temple floors. Their carefully calibrated drips meant not for human eyes but for the gods alone. Even the Mayans, masters of celestial calculation, sealed their most intricate timekeeping devices within pyramids, as if locking away a sacred conversation between earth and sky. What ties these discoveries together is their deliberate concealment. Unlike coins or pottery, which scatter freely across dig sites, these clocks appear in places of intentional hiding, wrapped in burial shrouds, sealed behind stone doors, or submerged in sacred waters. Their placement suggests a ritual act, as if exposing them to the world would disrupt the delicate balance they were meant to maintain. Consider the Chinese incense clocks, their intricate timelines marked by the slow burn of fragrant wood. Many were found in imperial tombs, their smoke meant to carry prayers upward, a silent dialogue between the living and the ancestors. The more we uncover, the clearer it becomes. These devices weren't simply buried out of practicality or decay. They were hidden because their power was too great to leave unguarded. A sundial in a marketplace might tell the hour, but one buried with a king, that was a key to the afterlife. The Antikythera mechanism could have revolutionized ancient astronomy, yet someone chose to let it sink beneath the waves. Perhaps these civilizations understood something we've forgotten. That time isn't just a measurement, but a force to be approached with reverence, even fear. Every excavation peels back another layer, revealing not just how these cultures kept time, but how they honored it by entrusting their most profound creations to the earth itself. To understand why these ancient timekeepers were buried rather than displayed, we must step into a world where science and spirituality were inseparable. For civilizations like the Egyptians, time wasn't just a measurement, it was a sacred thread woven into the fabric of existence. Take the water clocks found in pharaohs' tombs. These weren't mere tools to track hours, they were passports to the afterlife, designed to help the deceased navigate the perilous journey through the underworld. Each drip of water mirrored the cyclical nature of life and death, a rhythm the Egyptians believed was dictated by the gods themselves. To leave such a device exposed would have been unthinkable, like leaving a sacred text open to the elements. The Babylonians took this reverence even further. Their astronomers didn't just observe the stars, they decoded messages from the divine. A misplaced sundial or an incorrectly aligned celestial clock wasn't just an error, it risked angering the gods and inviting catastrophe. That's why their most precise timekeeping instruments were often concealed within temple sanctuaries, accessible only to high priests who underwent years of purification rituals. To the Babylonians, time wasn't neutral, it carried omens. An eclipse wasn't just an astronomical event, it was a warning, a sign that demanded interpretation. By hiding these devices, they weren't hoarding knowledge, they were safeguarding the balance between heaven and earth. Even in Mesoamerica, where the Maya crafted calendars of astonishing accuracy, timekeeping was never a purely scientific pursuit. Their long count calendar didn't just mark days, it mapped cosmic cycles, predicting epochs of creation and destruction. When archaeologists uncovered buried Mayan timekeeping devices, they found them adorned with symbols of deities, their mechanisms intertwined with rituals. These weren't calculators, they were altars meant to commune with forces beyond human understanding. Burial wasn't an act of disposal, it was an act of devotion, a way to return these sacred objects to the earth that sustained them. This blurring of science and spirituality might seem foreign today, but it reveals a profound truth about these cultures. They saw time not as a resource to be managed, but as a mystery to be honored. A sundial in a public square could tell you when to plant crops, but one buried in a tomb that could guide a soul through eternity. The care taken to hide these devices speaks volumes. They weren't just protecting technology, they were preserving a covenant with the divine, ensuring that the secrets of time remained where they belonged, in the hands of those who understood their weight. Perhaps that's why these buried clocks resonate so deeply today. In a world obsessed with efficiency, where time is sliced into ever smaller increments, these ancient artifacts remind us that time was once something more. It wasn't just counted, it was revered. Every gear, every etched line, every drop of water was a prayer, an acknowledgement that some mysteries are too vast to be left in the open. And so they rest beneath the sand, waiting not to be used but to be remembered. Power wasn't just held in the hands of ancient rulers, it was measured in the turning of gears and the dripping of water. In civilizations where priests and kings claimed divine authority, controlling time wasn't about efficiency, it was about dominance. Imagine a society where only the elite could predict an eclipse or declare the start of a sacred festival. That knowledge wasn't just practical, it was political. The Babylonian kings didn't just consult the stars, they weaponized them, using celestial omens to justify wars or quell uprisings. A sundial in the wrong hands could disrupt the entire social order, turning obedient subjects into skeptics questioning the king's divine mandate. This wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. In ancient China, the emperor's astronomers guarded their celestial calculations like state secrets, knowing that a rival who could accurately predict the seasons might also rally farmers to revolt. The same logic applied to the water clocks of Alexandria, hidden deep within the library's inner chambers. These devices didn't just track hours, they reinforced hierarchy. By burying or restricting access to advanced timekeeping, rulers ensured that the masses relied on temple bells or royal decrees rather than their own understanding. Time, in essence, became a leash, one that kept society tethered to the established order, but the fear went deeper than rebellion. Some clocks were buried not just to hide them, but to neutralize them. The Aztecs believed certain calendars held apocalyptic power, their cycles capable of summoning cosmic upheaval if misread. A misplaced calculation could invite drought or disaster, so only the highest priests were trusted to interact with these sacred mechanisms. Even the Greeks, celebrated for their scientific openness, whispered of the Antikythera mechanism's potential dangers, a device too precise, too revealing of the heavens' mysteries to be left unguarded. Shipwrecks and tombs became safes, locking away knowledge too volatile for the public square. Yet this control wasn't absolute. Archaeologists have found fragments of sundials in ancient marketplaces, proof that some timekeeping trickled down. But these were crude imitations compared to the masterpieces entombed with kings. The message was clear: you could know the hour, but never the secrets behind it. That tension between shared time and hoarded time shaped empires. When Rome standardized clocks across its territories, it wasn't just organizing daily life. It was imprinting imperial authority onto every sunrise and sunset. What's striking is how these ancient power plays echo into the modern world. Today, atomic clocks and GPS satellites dictate global systems, yet access to their inner workings remains restricted. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The buried clocks of antiquity remind us that time was never neutral. It was, and still is, a currency of control. The sand that covered them wasn't just a preservative, it was a silencer, muffling knowledge too dangerous to be set free. The craftsmanship behind these ancient timekeeping devices wasn't just skilled labor. It was a guarded art form passed down like sacred knowledge through generations of secretive guilds. Picture a Babylonian workshop where a master artisan painstakingly calibrated a water clock's flow, knowing that a single misaligned hole could throw off the sacred timing of temple rituals. These weren't mere technicians, they were keepers of mysteries, their techniques so closely held that even the tools they used were often buried with them. When archaeologists uncover a bronze astrolabe or a delicate geared mechanism, they're not just finding a clock, they're holding the legacy of a guild that vanished centuries ago, its secrets still locked in the metal. This culture of secrecy wasn't just about pride, it was survival. In a world where innovation could mean the difference between a kingdom's prosperity and its collapse, timekeeping technology was a closely guarded commodity. The Greek Antikythera mechanism, with its interlocking gears predicting planetary movements, would have been a marvel in any city square. Yet its creators chose to let it sink to the ocean floor, perhaps to prevent rivals from reverse engineering their masterpiece. Similarly, Egyptian water clocks found in tombs often bear no markings or signatures, their makers anonymous by design. To share these secrets risked not just lost profits, but the unraveling of an entire societal order built on controlled knowledge. The artistry of these devices only deepened the need for concealment. A sundial might seem simple, but the ones buried with pharaohs were etched with hieroglyphs aligning with constellations only visible to initiates. The Mayan calendar wheels, with their intricate glyphs tracking Venus cycles, weren't just functional, they were masterpieces of scribble art, their pigments mixed from rare minerals. By hiding them in pyramids, the Maya weren't just protecting data, they were preserving a visual language that conveyed power as much as precision. Even the Chinese incense clocks, their trails of smoke marking hours, doubled as ceremonial objects, their designs so elegant that their mere display could inspire imitation. What's fascinating is how this secrecy mirrors modern intellectual property battles, though with higher stakes. Today's patents expire, ancient artisans took their techniques to the grave. Some buried clocks show signs of deliberate sabotage, gears filed down, inscriptions obscured as if their makers feared posthumous theft. A recently unearthed Roman portable sundial had its latitude markings scraped away, useless to anyone but its original owner. These weren't acts of vandalism but of calculated protection. The message was clear: this knowledge belonged to a select few, and the earth itself would enforce that boundary. Yet hidden within this secrecy lies a paradox. The very act of burying these clocks preserved them far better than display ever could. The Antikythera mechanism survived because it lay untouched in saltwater for millennia, while exposed counterparts turned to dust. In trying to hide their craft, these artisans unknowingly gifted their work to eternity. Now, as we painstakingly reconstruct their techniques, we're not just recovering lost technology, we're piecing together a testament to human ingenuity's timeless dance with mystery. The sand that swallowed these clocks didn't erase them. It became their silent collaborator, guarding their secrets until the world was ready to listen. To grasp why ancient civilizations buried their clocks, we must confront a truth far deeper than functionality. Time wasn't just measured, it was mourned. The sundial placed in an Egyptian tomb wasn't merely an instrument. It was a poet's lament carved in stone, its shadow tracing the final journey of a soul stepping beyond earthly cycles. For cultures that saw existence as a fleeting whisper between eternities, burying a clock was like burying a mirror, one that reflected not minutes but mortality itself. The Babylonians inscribed their water clocks with hymns to the goddess of the underworld, their dripping water echoing the tears of those left behind. Even the Mayans, with their precise calendars, buried timekeeping wheels alongside rulers as if to say, "Here lies not just a king, but his days numbered and now complete." This symbolism wasn't morbid, it was transcendent. In Rome, portable sundials accompanied soldiers to war, their bronze faces tarnished by hands that knew each hour might be their last. When these clocks were later found in graves, their cracked gnomons pointed not to the sun, but to the afterlife. The Chinese took this further, crafting incense clocks whose fragrant smoke marked the passage of hours while symbolizing the soul's ascent. To bury such an object was to release time itself, letting it dissolve like incense ash back to the earth. These artifacts blurred the line between tool and talisman, their hidden presence whispering that death wasn't an end, but a return to time's source. The most poignant examples come from Viking burials, where sundials were placed in ships set ablaze and pushed out to sea. Unlike the Egyptians, who sealed clocks away to guide the dead, the Vikings sent theirs into the flames, a surrender to time's consuming fire. This duality, preservation and sacrifice, reveals a universal human reckoning. Whether entombed beneath pyramids or cast into waves, these clocks embodied a paradox. Time was both a force to be mastered and one that mastered all. Modern chronometers tick with clinical precision, but they lack the weight of those buried dials and gears. An Apple Watch can't convey what an Aztec calendar stone did when laid in a ruler's grave, that every rotation of the cosmos carries us closer to oblivion and perhaps to rebirth. The sand that swallowed these clocks didn't silence them. It became their chorus, singing of eras when humans didn't just count time, they honored its passage like a sacred elegy, written in shadows and silence. For some ancient cultures, displaying a clock wasn't just impractical, it was unthinkable, a violation of sacred boundaries. The Greeks, masters of geometry and astronomy, harbored a deep-seated fear that measuring time with too much precision might provoke the Moirai, the three fates who spun, measured, and cut the threads of human lives. To them, tracking hours too closely wasn't just innovation. It was arrogance, an attempt to steal the gods' authority over destiny itself. That's why certain Greek sundials were buried in temple crypts, their faces turned downward, not broken, but deliberately inverted, as if to say, "This knowledge belongs to the divine, not the marketplace." In West Africa, the Dogon people crafted intricate celestial calendars to track the orbit of Sirius, yet these were never displayed openly. Instead, they were concealed in sacred caves, accessible only to spiritual leaders. The reasoning was profound. Time wasn't merely a resource to be managed, but a living force woven into the natural world. To expose it to the uninitiated risked disrupting the balance between seasons, harvests, and ancestral spirits. A buried clock in this context wasn't hidden out of shame. It was protected out of reverence, like a seed tucked into soil to ensure its power could grow unseen before bearing fruit. Even in medieval Europe, public clocks faced resistance. When the first mechanical tower clocks appeared in town squares, some communities smashed them, fearing their relentless ticking summoned demons. The rhythmic chimes, marking hours with unnatural precision, were seen as a defiance of God's organic design, daylight and darkness, not gears and weights. In one Swiss village, a clock was buried at a crossroads, a ritual typically reserved for witches or cursed objects. The message was clear: tampering with time wasn't just dangerous, it was sacrilege. These taboos reveal a pattern far older than any gear or dial. From the Aztecs, who believed counting days too openly could hasten apocalyptic cycles, to Tibetan monasteries that concealed water clocks to protect their meditative rhythms, cultures worldwide shared an instinct: timekeeping wasn't neutral. It was a pact with forces beyond human control. The act of burying a clock, then, wasn't superstition, it was humility. A sundial left in the open might tell you when to eat, but one hidden in the earth whispered a harder truth: some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only honored. What's striking is how these fears mirror modern anxieties. Today, we fret over AI predicting our behaviors or algorithms manipulating our attention. Different tools, same unease. The buried clocks of antiquity remind us that every leap in measuring time comes with a cost, a tension between knowledge and reverence. Perhaps those ancient cultures understood something we've forgotten: that time, in the end, isn't just something we measure. It's something we live, and some truths are too vast to be left uncovered. The night sky wasn't just a backdrop for ancient civilizations, it was a living library, its constellations holding secrets that could make or break empires. When priests buried clocks aligned with celestial events, they weren't hiding mere tools, they were concealing the very language of the gods. Take the Nebra sky disk, a bronze marvel discovered in a German hillside, its gold inlays mapping the Pleiades cluster with eerie precision. Buried face down beneath ritual offerings, this 3,000-year-old artifact wasn't meant to tell time for farmers. It was a key to predicting lunar eclipses, events believed to herald divine wrath. By sealing it in earth, its keepers ensured that only those trained to read the heavens could wield its power. This celestial secrecy took on even greater urgency in Babylon, where astronomer priests tracked Venus's movements with water clocks hidden beneath ziggurats. A single misstep in predicting the planet's cycles could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and famine, knowledge so vital that cuneiform tablets warned against sharing it with outsiders. The clocks themselves were secondary. It was the celestial patterns they revealed that held real value. When archaeologists unearthed a Babylonian star almanac near the ruins of Nineveh, they found its calculations deliberately obscured by layers of encrypted symbols. These weren't mistakes, they were safeguards, ensuring that only those who'd spent decades studying the skies could decode time's deeper rhythms. The Maya elevated this practice to an art form. Their Dresden Codex, a bark paper book buried for centuries, contains Venus tables accurate to within 2 hours over 500 years. Yet these weren't displayed in royal courts, they were entombed with priests, their pages smeared with sacrificial resin as if to seal their potency. Modern scholars realized why. When Venus appeared as the morning star, it signaled the start of wars. Controlling that knowledge meant controlling history itself. By burying their clocks and codices, the Maya weren't just preserving science, they were monopolizing destiny. But perhaps the most haunting example comes from ancient China. The emperor's astronomers used armillary spheres, bronze rings tracing planetary orbits to predict solar eclipses, events seen as heavenly judgments on his rule. When one such device was discovered in a sealed tomb near Xi'an, Its gears were locked in position, forever frozen at the exact celestial alignment of the Emperor's death. This wasn't coincidence, it was a final act of defiance, ensuring that even in the afterlife, only he could command time's narrative. The deeper we look, the clearer it becomes. These buried clocks were never just about marking hours. They were about controlling the stories written in the stars, stories of power, survival, and the fragile line between human and divine. To uncover one is to crack open a vault not of gears, but of long-lost worldviews where time wasn't counted in minutes, but in the slow dance of light across the cosmos. Imagine a world where the harvest, the market, even the taxes you paid all hinged on an object no larger than your hand, a water clock hidden in a governor's palace. Its steady drip dictating when crops could be planted or when merchants had to pack up their stalls. In ancient economies, time wasn't just measured, it was monetized. The Babylonians didn't just use their clay tablet calendars to track lunar cycles. They used them to calculate interest on loans, with penalties enforced down to the hour. A sundial placed in a city square wasn't a public service. It was a tool of economic control, ensuring everyone paid tolls or taxes according to the same rigid schedule. But here's the catch: these devices were worthless if counterfeit. A merchant with a secretly altered water clock could undercut competitors by opening early or delaying shipments without penalty. That's why the most precise timekeepers weren't just guarded. They were buried, taken out of circulation to prevent economic chaos. The stakes were even higher when it came to agriculture. In Egypt, the annual Nile flood was the lifeblood of the kingdom, its timing dictating the entire growing season. Priests used star clocks to predict the flood's arrival, a forecast so valuable that rival regions would pay dearly for advance notice. But sharing that knowledge risked destabilizing grain markets, so these devices were kept in temple vaults, their mechanisms obscured by layers of ritual. When archaeologists uncovered a cache of farming almanacs near Thebes, they found something telling. The water clocks described within were deliberately missing key measurements, as if the scribes had censored their own records to protect the economy. Tax collection reveals another layer of this financial chess game. The Romans famously standardized timekeeping across their empire, but not for convenience. Their sundials ensured provinces paid taxes on the same schedule, down to the solstice. A buried fragment from Pompey's tax office shows why. Someone had scratched false hour markers into a sundial's face, a primitive form of fraud meant to delay payments. After that scandal, officials began sealing official clocks in stone boxes, their bronze faces visible only through small, guarded openings. The message was clear: tampering with time was tantamount to stealing from the state itself. Yet the most revealing examples come from the Silk Road, where caravan schedules relied on portable incense clocks. These weren't just timers, they were contracts, their burning sticks marking delivery deadlines for spices and silks. When one was discovered in a Mongolian tomb, its interior contained a surprise: traces of mercury, added to make the incense burn unpredictably slow. Historians now believe this was an ancient form of insurance fraud, a way for merchants to claim delays were acts of the gods rather than their own miscalculations. After similar devices surfaced, Central Asian rulers ordered them buried with customs agents, ensuring no living hands could alter their sacred rhythms. What emerges from these fragments isn't just a story of ancient technology, but of time's transformation into currency. Every buried clock represents a financial system built on trust. Trust that seasons would align, that markets would open fairly, that taxes weren't being cheated. In a world without atomic precision, controlling time meant controlling wealth itself. The sand that swallowed these devices didn't just hide their mechanisms, it sealed away the very heartbeat of economies that once pulsed to their rhythm. Warfare in the ancient world wasn't just about swords and shields. It was a silent duel against time itself. Picture a Roman legion advancing under cover of darkness, their movements synchronized not by shouted orders, but by the silent turn of a bronze sundial tucked inside their commander's cloak. These portable timekeepers, small enough to fit in a soldier's palm, were more than tools, they were weapons. The difference between victory and defeat could hinge on something as simple as knowing precisely when to ambush an enemy at dawn's first light or retreat before the tide cut off escape routes. That's why the most sophisticated military clocks weren't displayed, they were concealed like battle plans, their mechanisms guarded as closely as fortifications. The Romans perfected this art of temporal warfare. Archaeologists have unearthed folding sundials from military outposts across the empire, their faces etched with markings for multiple latitudes, proof that legions carried these devices to foreign lands, recalibrating them like ancient GPS units. But here's what's revealing: many were found buried beneath barracks or hidden in officers' graves. This wasn't accidental loss, it was deliberate secrecy. A sundial captured by enemy hands could reveal patrol schedules, supply routes, even the optimal time to siege a city. The same logic applied to water clocks used in naval battles. Greek triremes relied on calibrated drips to coordinate oar strokes during silent nighttime maneuvers, devices so critical they were dismantled and tossed overboard if capture seemed imminent. Other civilizations took this concealment further. The Mongols, masters of lightning-fast cavalry strikes, timed their attacks using candle clocks sealed in leather cases. These weren't just timers, they were psychological weapons. By striking at mathematically precise intervals, say, every third hour, they created an illusion of omnipresence, making scattered raids feel like an inescapable tide. When Genghis Khan's tomb was rumored to contain such a device, it wasn't just superstition. It was a final act of strategic silence, ensuring no rival could replicate his army's uncanny coordination. Even siege warfare hinged on hidden timekeeping. During the Crusades, defenders in fortified cities used star-aligned clocks to predict when moonless nights would leave attackers vulnerable. These calculations were so valuable that when cracked chevaliers fell, the victorious Mamluks reportedly pried a celestial clock from the walls and buried it, not to destroy it, but to withhold its power from future enemies. The message was clear: in war, controlling time was as vital as controlling territory. What's striking is how these ancient tactics echo in modern warfare. Today's encrypted satellite clocks guide drone strikes with eerie precision, just as Roman sundials once guided javelin volleys. The medium has changed, but the principle remains: those who master time master the battlefield. Every buried sundial, every sunken water clock tells the same story, that some advantages are too potent to leave exposed. In the shadows of history, time itself was the ultimate weapon, and the earth its most reliable vault. In the heart of a Mayan temple, beneath layers of sacred soil, lies a broken timekeeping wheel, not discarded, but carefully placed alongside jade figurines and spiny oyster shells. This wasn't trash, it was an offering, a sacrifice of time itself to gods who demanded more than gold or grain. Across Mesoamerica, archaeologists have uncovered these ritual burials: water clocks filled with honey instead of water, sundials smeared with sacrificial resin, each one a testament to a belief that time wasn't just a tool, but a divine gift meant to be returned. The Aztecs took this practice to profound extremes. During the New Fire ceremony, held once every 52 years to avert cosmic collapse, priests would bury functioning calendar wheels in temple courtyards. These weren't just symbolic gestures, they were acts of renewal, a way to reboot time by entombing the old cycle and welcoming the new. Imagine the weight of that moment, a society so attuned to time's sacred nature that they literally buried their clocks to keep the universe in motion. The devices themselves were often cracked or defaced before burial, not from carelessness, but to release their spiritual essence, like breaking a vessel to free what it contains. But why offer timekeeping devices instead of more typical treasures? The answer lies in how these cultures perceived time's origin. The Popol Vuh, the Maya's sacred text, describes gods laboring over multiple attempts to create humans' failures marked by flawed calendars. Timekeeping wasn't just a human invention, it was a divine blueprint woven into creation itself. By burying a clock, they weren't just hiding technology, they were returning a fragment of that celestial design to its source. Similar practices emerged halfway across the world. In ancient India, water clocks used in Vedic rituals were interred under temple foundations after major ceremonies, their bronze bowls turned upward as if catching prayers. Chinese incense clocks, their delicate trails of smoke once marking imperial ceremonies, were sealed in earth during equinoxes, a symbolic planting of time, meant to ensure its cyclical rebirth. Even the Celts deposited sundials in bogs, places they considered thresholds to the other world, as if mailing time back to the deities who first measured it. What unites these traditions is their reverence for time as a living force. A sundial left in the sun might track hours, but one buried in sacred ground became a bridge between realms. Modern science measures time down to the quantum flicker of atomic vibrations, but these ancient rituals remind us of something deeper. That time was never just numbers on a dial. It was, and perhaps still is, a sacred current, flowing through human hands only briefly before returning to the eternal. The celestial dance of the moon and sun didn't just mark time for ancient cultures, it dictated the very pulse of existence. When societies buried clocks aligned with these cycles, they weren't merely storing tools, they were safeguarding the heartbeat of their world. Take the Mayan Dresden Codex, its bark pages meticulously recording Venus cycles with precision that still stuns astronomers. This wasn't a book left open on a scholar's desk, it was entombed beneath layers of ceremonial offerings, wrapped in jaguar pelts as if to shield its power. To the Maya, these calculations weren't just data, they were sacred dialogues with the cosmos, too potent to be left vulnerable to disrespect or decay. Lunar calendars held even deeper mystique. In Mesopotamia, priests buried clay tablets etched with moon phases beneath temple foundations, ensuring only initiates could access the knowledge of when to plant crops or conduct rituals. A single misaligned month could throw off entire harvests, so these lunar guides were treated like living entities anointed with oils, whispered to in prayers, and finally laid to rest in the earth that depended on their accuracy. The same reverence echoed in ancient China, where jade discs carved with lunar cycles were placed in imperial tombs, their surfaces mirroring the moon's glow to guide rulers through the afterlife's eternal night. Solar calendars carried equal weight. The Egyptians didn't just build obelisks to cast shadows, they buried miniature sundials in the foundations of temples, aligning them with solstice sunbeams that would penetrate hidden chambers once a year. These weren't public timekeepers, they were devotional acts, their secrets known only to high priests who used them to predict the Nile's life-giving floods. When archaeologists unearthed a cache of these buried dials near Heliopolis, they found something telling. Each one had been ritually killed before interment, their nomens snapped to freeze them at a moment of celestial significance. What's striking is how these practices transcended geography. From Celtic stone circles calibrated to equinoxes and sealed beneath mounds, to the Incas' buried gold sun discs hidden from conquistadors, cultures separated by oceans shared an instinct: celestial time was too sacred to leave unguarded. The Incas took this further, building entire underground chambers to house solar calendars, accessible only via tunnels aligned with the June solstice sunrise. To expose these devices to the uninitiated wasn't just risky, it was blasphemous, a disruption of the natural order. This universal urge to conceal celestial clocks reveals a profound truth about ancient worldviews. Time wasn't linear to these cultures, it was a spiral, repeating in patterns only the worthy could interpret. By burying a lunar almanac or solar wheel, they weren't hiding knowledge from the future. They were planting it like a seed, ensuring it would resurface when the cosmos decreed. Modern atomic clocks may tick with flawless precision, but they'll never carry the weight of those buried dials and disks, objects crafted not just to track time, but to honor the celestial forces that first set it in motion. Buried beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence, some ancient clocks carry secrets we may never fully decipher. Consider the strange case of the Carthaginian star clocks, small bronze discs recovered from burial sites, their surfaces pocked with irregular holes that align with no known constellation. Were they navigational aids, ritual objects, or something else entirely? The artisans who crafted them left no manuals, only cryptic markings that modern scholars struggle to interpret. Even more puzzling are the Incanquipu clocks, bundles of knotted cords found coiled in stone vaults, their intricate patterns possibly tracking lunar cycles in ways we've yet to crack. These weren't just timekeepers lost to history, they were entire languages of time, their vocabularies erased by conquest and time. The deeper archaeologists dig, the more they uncover devices that defy categorization. In 2012, a team excavating a Byzantine monastery uncovered a sealed lead box containing what appeared to be a sundial, except its gnomon curved backward, casting shadows in impossible directions. X-rays revealed tiny glass beads embedded in its surface, suggesting it may have been used alongside now lost optical tools. Why bury such a marvel? Perhaps its makers feared its true purpose would be misunderstood or misused. Similar enigmas surround the Celtic moon wheels, stone discs etched with spiraling grooves that correspond roughly to 19-year lunar cycles, yet were deliberately smashed before burial. Were they broken to release their power or to prevent it from falling into rival hands? Some concealments seem almost playful in their obscurity. The recently discovered Javanese shadow clocks feature perforated panels that project not numbers, but animal shapes whose movements marked intervals: a tiger for dawn, a heron for midday. Yet no surviving texts explain the full symbolism, leaving historians to wonder if these were teaching tools, ceremonial objects, or both. Even more baffling are the Norse frost dials found in Scandinavian bogs, their rune-carved surfaces calibrated to track time through ice crystallization patterns unique to specific fjords. Without the oral traditions that once accompanied them, they're beautiful but silent witnesses to forgotten winters. What makes these mysteries so compelling isn't just their unsolved nature, it's what they reveal about knowledge itself. Every culture guards its most vital truths, but the methods vary wildly. The Maya encoded time in architecture, the Chinese in jade, the Vikings in poetry we can no longer fully parse. When these clocks were buried, their creators likely assumed future generations would still speak their language, not just of words but of stars, shadows, and seasons. Now, as we painstakingly reassemble fragments, we're not just reconstructing devices, we're learning humility. The sand that preserved these clocks also whispers a warning. No knowledge, no matter how carefully buried, survives without someone left to remember its name. The practice of hiding timekeeping devices transcends geography, yet each civilization wrapped its clocks in layers of meaning as unique as their gods. In Egypt, water clocks found in royal tombs weren't just buried, They were ritually killed, their measuring vessels cracked to freeze them at the moment of a pharaoh's death, ensuring their function continued in the afterlife. Contrast this with China's Han Dynasty, where officials sealed intricate incense clocks inside imperial vaults, not to serve the dead, but to maintain the living emperor's monopoly on agricultural and astronomical knowledge. The shared act of concealment masked profoundly different intentions. One culture sought to extend time beyond mortality, the other to control its flow among the living. Mesopotamia adds another fascinating thread to this tapestry. There, buried astrolabes, star-calibrated discs of bronze, weren't interred with rulers but hidden beneath temple floors, accessible only to priests who'd undergone decades of training. Unlike the Egyptians' funerary focus or China's political pragmatism, the Mesopotamians treated timekeeping as sacred literacy, a language so potent its alphabet celestial movements had to be protected from profane eyes. Yet all three societies shared an unspoken understanding that time's measurement wasn't neutral science, but a form of communion with forces that could uplift or unravel civilizations. The Maya took this concept even further. When archaeologists unearth their buried calendar wheels, they often find them smeared with indigo dye and jade dust, materials symbolizing the sacred breath of creation. Where Egyptian clocks froze moments and Chinese ones hoarded knowledge, Mayan timekeepers were literally baptized in the elements they measured, then returned to the earth like offerings. This trifecta of approaches preservation, restriction, and consecration reveals time's fluid symbolism across cultures, a commodity, a covenant, and a cosmic thread all at once. What's startling is how these differences converged in practice, whether entombed in pyramids, locked in observatories, or sunk in cenotes. These devices all ended up shrouded in earth. The medium of concealment became a universal language, speaking louder than the particular reasons behind it. A pharaoh's water clock and a Mayan star dial might have served opposite ends, one guiding a soul, the other predicting Venus wars, yet both were deemed too powerful to leave unguarded. Modern museums display these artifacts behind glass, but perhaps their true lesson lies in what we can't see. The empty spaces around them, the missing context of rituals, the lost whispers of prayers remind us that time was never just gears and shadows to these cultures. It was the invisible current that carried empires, the silent partner to every harvest and battle and birth. When we line up these buried clocks side by side, we're not just comparing ancient technologies. We're witnessing the many ways humanity has tried to hold the infinite in their hands, then wisely, reverently, let it slip back into the dark. In the hushed chambers of ancient temples, where sunlight rarely touched the stone floors, priests and scholars huddled over water clocks and star charts, not merely as keepers of time, but as gatekeepers of power. The ability to predict an eclipse or declare the start of a sacred festival wasn't just academic. It was the ultimate leverage over kings and commoners alike. Consider the Library of Alexandria, its shelves groaning with scrolls detailing hydraulic clocks and celestial mechanics. When flames consumed that repository of knowledge, more than books were lost, an entire system of intellectual control went up in smoke. The few surviving timekeeping devices weren't displayed in public squares. They were smuggled into crypts or smuggled across deserts, their mechanisms guarded like state secrets. This monopoly on time wasn't accidental. Babylonian astronomer priests spent decades memorizing celestial patterns, passing down knowledge through initiations so rigorous that mistaking a planetary alignment could mean expulsion from the order. Their clay tablets weren't just records, they were credentials proving their ability to interpret the god's will. A sundial in the hands of a farmer was harmless, but one calibrated to predict lunar phases. That threatened the priesthood's very reason for existing. That's why the most advanced clocks were often buried beneath temple foundations, accessible only through labyrinthine tunnels known to a select few. The same pattern emerged in medieval Europe, where monastic orders hid mechanical clocks behind abbey walls, their gears turning in secrecy long before public clock towers chimed over towns. The Maya took this further, encoding their astronomical prowess into hieroglyphs so complex that even modern linguists needed breakthroughs to crack them. When a Spanish bishop burned Mayan codices in the 16th century, he wasn't just destroying pagan texts, he was erasing a millennia-old system of temporal authority. Surviving calendar wheels were hastily buried by Mayan scribes, not to preserve knowledge but to deny it to conquerors. These devices weren't mere tools, they were the foundational texts of a priesthood's power, as vital as a king's scepter or a general's sword. Yet this gatekeeping had unintended consequences. By hoarding knowledge, these elites ensured its fragility. The Antikythera mechanism's creators likely never imagined their masterpiece would spend 2 millennia underwater, its secrets dissolving into corrosion. The Library of Alexandria's lost texts on water clocks might have revolutionized Mediterranean engineering if they hadn't been so fiercely protected that no copies survived. There's a tragic irony here. In trying to cement their dominance, these scholars often guaranteed their wisdom would vanish with them. Modern universities and research labs still grapple with this tension between sharing knowledge and controlling it. The buried clocks of antiquity remind us that timekeeping was never just about measurement. It was about who gets to define reality itself, who holds the keys to the cosmic clockwork. Every device hidden in a tomb or sunk in a shipwreck whispers the same lesson. Knowledge hoarded is power preserved, but at the risk of being lost forever. Perhaps that's why these artifacts haunt us not just as marvels of engineering, but as warnings etched in bronze and stone. The desert doesn't just bury secrets, it preserves them. While modern museums battle humidity and pollution to protect fragile artifacts, the dry sands of Egypt or the sealed chambers of Mayan pyramids did that work effortlessly, cradling delicate clock mechanisms for centuries. Take the water clocks found in Theban tombs. Their bronze gears, still gleaming after millennia, would have corroded to dust if left exposed to Nile Valley moisture. The same principle applies to the star charts etched into Mesopotamian clay tablets, their precise astronomical markings surviving only because they were intentionally buried beneath layers of impermeable temple flooring. What might seem like deliberate concealment was often brilliant preservation in disguise. Underground environments created natural time capsules. In the oxygen-deprived depths of Scandinavian bogs, Viking navigational sundials emerged with their wooden frames intact, their calibrations for latitude still legible, something impossible if they'd been left exposed to Scandinavia's punishing freeze-thaw cycles. Even the Antikythera mechanism, though lost at sea, benefited from an unintended preservation method. Salt water formed a protective layer of mineralization over its bronze components, shielding inscriptions that would have vanished through surface oxidation. The Earth, in these cases, wasn't just a hiding place, it was a collaborator, slowing time's relentless decay. But there's a fascinating paradox at play. While burial saved these objects physically, it often erased their cultural context. A Mayan calendar wheel might survive pristine in a sealed cenote, but the oral traditions explaining its use vanished when the priests who buried it passed away. The Incan quipu clocks, their knotted cords perfectly preserved in dry Andean caves, now baffle archaeologists because the knowledge to read them was deliberately kept secret before being lost to conquest. Preservation, then, became a double-edged sword, saving the artifact while sacrificing its meaning. Compare this to the fate of exposed timekeepers. The great public sundials of Rome, celebrated in their era, now exist only as fragments, their marble surfaces worn smooth by centuries of weather and hands. Medieval European tower clocks, their intricate ironwork proudly displayed, often succumbed to rust within generations, leaving behind only written descriptions. The lesson is clear: visibility came at a cost. What societies gained in shared utility, they lost in longevity. Every choice to display a clock was, in essence, a gamble, a trade-off between immediate function and eternal survival. This tension between use and preservation echoes into modern conservation. Today's atomic clocks, housed in temperature-controlled bunkers, mirror ancient practices, their critical components shielded from environmental variables, much like Babylonian water clocks once were. The difference lies in intentionality. Where we now preserve through technology, ancient cultures achieved it through geography, leveraging deserts, tombs, and oceans as natural archives. Their buried treasure mentality wasn't just mystical, it was profoundly pragmatic. By letting the earth itself be their museum, they ensured future generations would hold in their hands not just artifacts, but time itself, frozen in gears and glyphs. Etched into the bronze surfaces of buried water clocks and carved along the edges of sundials hidden in tombs, ancient inscriptions whisper in languages we've only begun to understand. Take the mysterious symbols on Carthaginian star clocks, circles within circles, dotted with precise yet cryptic markings. Some scholars believe these encode lunar cycles, while others argue they map the paths of long-forgotten constellations. Without a Rosetta Stone for timekeeping, these messages remain tantalizingly out of reach, like a locked door with the key just beyond our grasp. Even the Antikythera mechanism, for all its technological marvel, bears Greek text that hints at functions we're still reconstructing, word by painstaking word. The challenge isn't just linguistic, it's contextual. A Mayan calendar wheel might feature glyphs we can read phonetically, but their full meaning dissolves without the oral traditions that once animated them. Imagine finding a modern clock with the words "Spring Forward" etched into its face without knowing daylight saving time existed. Future archaeologists might puzzle over whether it referred to seasons, mechanics, or something more spiritual. This is the dilemma facing researchers studying buried Incan Quipu clocks. The knot's mathematical precision is clear, but the stories they were meant to tell, warnings of drought, prophecies of celestial events, are lost to the silence of centuries. Some inscriptions seem deliberately obscure. The Nebra sky disk, buried face down with its gold star map, bears symbols that align with no known constellation. Were they meant to represent a specific celestial event, like a supernova visible only to its creators, or were they abstract, a coded message meant only for initiates? The same questions haunt Egyptian water clocks found in the Valley of the Kings, their inner chambers inscribed with hieroglyphs that deviate from standard funerary texts. One particularly enigmatic example includes a repeated symbol resembling an hourglass, a shape not otherwise seen in Egyptian iconography until millennia later. Yet every so often, a breakthrough cracks the code. In 2019, a team studying Mesopotamian clay tablets realized that certain recurring marks near eclipse predictions weren't just notations, they were error corrections, proof that ancient astronomers refined their calculations over generations. Another discovery in Crete revealed that symbols on Minoan star clocks matched the alignment of a now submerged island, suggesting they doubled as navigational guides. These small victories hint at a profound truth. The inscriptions weren't just labels, they were dialogues between maker and user, between earth and sky, between the living and the divine. The irony is poignant. These devices were buried to protect their secrets, yet the very act of concealment preserved the puzzles for us to ponder. As laser scans and AI translation tools bring us closer to deciphering them, we're not just recovering lost knowledge, we're learning how to listen. The language of time wasn't meant to be static. It was a conversation, one that continues every time a researcher leans over a newly unearthed dial, tracing its symbols like a whisper across the ages. Modern technology has become the torch illuminating the shadows of history, revealing secrets ancient civilizations never intended us to see. Where archaeologists once relied on brushes and guesswork, they now wield computed tomography scanners that peer through layers of corrosion like X-ray vision, reconstructing shattered clock mechanisms pixel by pixel. The Antikythera mechanism, once a corroded lump salvaged from a shipwreck, has yielded astonishing details through high-resolution surface imaging, exposing tiny gear teeth thinner than fingernails that predicted planetary movements with eerie precision. These aren't just tools, they're time machines, letting us examine 2,000-year-old devices with less intrusion than a museum curator opening a drawer. The real breakthroughs come when technology intersects with patience. In 2021, researchers studying a Mayan calendar wheel buried beneath Copan's hieroglyphic stairway employed neutron tomography, a technique usually reserved for aerospace engineering, to detect traces of mercury in the artifact's channels. The discovery rewrote assumptions. What was thought to be a simple sundial actually functioned as a liquid-powered eclipse predictor, its toxic contents possibly symbolizing the blood of sacrificed captives. Similarly, multispectral imaging on Egyptian water clocks has revealed faded ink markings invisible to the naked eye, notations that prove priests adjusted their devices seasonally to account for the Nile's changing flow rates. But the most profound revelations emerge when these technologies collaborate. At Oxford's Bodleian Library, a team combined reflectance transformation imaging with artificial intelligence to decode a palimpsest, a reused parchment containing erased Byzantine clock designs beneath later religious texts. The algorithm detected subtle indentations from the original stylus, reconstructing gear ratios that match descriptions in long-lost texts by Archimedes. This isn't just recovery, it's resurrection, pulling knowledge from the precipice of oblivion. Yet for all our advancements, some mysteries still guard their secrets. The lead box sundial from that Byzantine monastery defies even synchrotron radiation scans. Its backward-curving gnomon and embedded glass beads suggest functions modern horology can't replicate. And those Carthaginian star disks, their irregular perforations align with no known star patterns, though quantum computing is now mapping possible celestial configurations from 3,000 years ago. Every answered question births new enigmas, proving that these buried clocks still hold cards they're not ready to reveal. What's clear is that we're no longer just digging up artifacts, we're conversing with them. When a 3D printed replica of the Antikythera mechanism's gears finally meshed perfectly in 2018, it wasn't merely an engineering triumph. It was the closing of a loop, a handshake across millennia between the genius who crafted it and the scientists who rebuilt it. The sand may have swallowed these timekeepers, but thanks to technology, their voices are rising from the earth clearer than ever, not as silent relics, but as storytellers finally ready to speak. Some of the most compelling theories suggest these buried clocks weren't standalone devices, they were fragments of a shadow chronology, a hidden timeline known only to initiates. Picture an ancient priesthood tracking celestial cycles so potent that revealing them could destabilize kingdoms. The Dendera zodiac in Egypt, for instance, wasn't just a star map. It encoded a secretive calendar tied to the flooding of the Nile, its full meaning reserved for temple elites. Similarly, the Maya's infamous calendar round wasn't merely a tool for marking days. It concealed a grand cycle of creation and destruction so vast that its completion in 2012 sparked global doomsday panic. What if these cultures buried their clocks not to discard them, but to safeguard knowledge too volatile for the uninitiated? The notion of hidden chronologies gains traction when examining discrepancies in ancient records. Babylonian clay tablets detail eclipse predictions with eerie accuracy, yet their public festivals often followed a simplified lunar calendar, a decoy timeline for the masses. Archaeologists have found water clocks in Mesopotamia with dual sets of markings, one for civic use, another with esoteric symbols aligning with planetary omens. This two-tiered system hints at a deliberate schism between shared time and secret time, where the true rhythm of the cosmos was reserved for those deemed worthy. The buried devices may have been the master keys to this concealed timescape, their mechanisms too revealing to risk exposure. Even more intriguing are the anomalies. The Antikythera mechanism's eclipse predictions extend decades beyond its shipwreck date. Why craft a device forecasting events its creators wouldn't live to see? Some researchers propose it was part of an archival tradition, preserving cycles for future initiates. Similarly, Incan quipu knots found in sealed caves don't just tally years, they cluster in patterns matching seismic activity along the Andes, suggesting a buried chronology of earthquakes spanning centuries. These weren't mere records, they were encrypted warnings passed down through generations of elites who understood time not as a line, but as a spiral of recurring cataclysms. The stakes of such knowledge become clear when examining power structures. In Babylon, a single mispredicted eclipse could topple a king blamed for divine displeasure. Chinese emperors employed astronomers not just to track stars, but to manipulate calendars, lengthening reigns by inserting phantom months before critical battles. The Mayans went further, tying their long count calendar to dynastic propaganda. Rulers would claim their coronations aligned with cosmic resets, framing their rule as divinely ordained. In this light, buried clocks weren't just scientific tools. They were instruments of statecraft, their concealment ensuring that control over time's narrative remained in the right hands. Yet the most haunting possibility is that some chronologies were hidden not for power but protection. The Aztecs believed their fifth sun cycle would end in catastrophe, a belief that may explain why certain calendar stones were interred beneath temples as if to delay their doom. Norse legends speak of the Ragnarök clock, a mythical device whose turning heralded the apocalypse. Some scholars now link these tales to real sundials found buried in Scandinavian bogs, their runes aligned to solstice extremes. Perhaps these cultures buried their most potent clocks not to hoard knowledge, but to shield the world from truths too terrible to comprehend. After all, if time itself has an expiration date, would you want everyone to know? Artistic depictions of timekeeping in the ancient world reveal far more than aesthetic choices. They're windows into how cultures saw time itself. On the walls of Egyptian tombs, frescoes show water clocks not in bustling marketplaces, but in the hands of jackal-headed Anubis, their drips measuring the deceased's journey through the underworld. The message is clear. These weren't mundane tools but sacred instruments, their use confined to realms beyond mortal sight. In Mesopotamia, cylinder seals depict priests carrying small sundials into temple sanctuaries, their faces turned away from the viewer as if to shield their secrets. Even the Mayan murals of Bonampak, vibrant with color, show calendar wheels being passed between rulers and gods, never displayed openly, always cradled like living things. The symbolism in these artworks often defies literal interpretation. A Greek vase painting from the 5th century BCE shows a winged Chronos, god of time, holding an hourglass except the glass is cracked, its sand spilling upward. Was this a commentary on time's fragility or a warning against measuring the divine? Similarly, Roman mosaics found in Pompeii's ruins portray water clocks surrounded by serpents swallowing their own tails, and our Ouroboros encircling the mechanism. The juxtaposition isn't accidental. Time wasn't linear to these artists. It was cyclical, paradoxical, too immense to be contained by the devices meant to track it. Ritual scenes offer the most tantalizing clues. A Carthaginian funerary stele shows a star clock being lowered into a tomb by veiled priestesses, its surface smeared with ochre, a pigment linked to blood sacrifices. In China's Han Dynasty murals, incense clocks appear beside ancestral shrines, their smoke depicted as twisting dragons rather than simple plumes. These weren't artistic flourishes, they were visual codes signaling that timekeeping intersected with the supernatural. Even mundane pottery tells a story. Much vessels from Peru portray officials breaking water clocks after harvest ceremonies, their shards buried in fields like seeds. The act wasn't destruction, it was transformation, returning time to the earth that sustained it. What unites these disparate artworks is their insistence on concealment. Whether painted, carved, or molded, timekeeping devices are rarely shown in public settings. They're tucked into the corners of compositions, partially obscured by robes or altar cloths, or placed in the hands of deities rather than humans. This visual language mirrors the physical burial of clocks. Both practices treat time as something too potent to be fully revealed. A Mayan vase might show a scribe painting a calendar glyph, but his hand always hovers over the most critical symbols, blocking our view. The artistic record also hints at why some clocks were buried intact while others were ritually killed. Etruscan tomb paintings depict gear mechanisms being dismantled before interment, their pieces arranged in celestial patterns. In contrast, Egyptian art often shows water clocks interred whole, their spouts sealed with wax preserved for the afterlife rather than released from service. These choices weren't arbitrary, they reflected cultural beliefs about whether time was a companion for the dead or a force to be surrendered back to the cosmos. Perhaps most strikingly, these artworks challenge modern assumptions about ancient technology. A Byzantine ivory diptych shows an empress holding a mechanical clock, its gears visible through a cutaway design, proof that such devices were known far earlier than once believed. Yet the same piece depicts the clock's face blank with no hour markings. The implication is profound. The value lay not in telling time, but in the mechanism's symbolic power. When we excavate a buried clock today, we're uncovering just one piece of its story. The art that survives alongside it, the frescoes, the carvings, the pottery whispers the rest, that every gear and glyph was part of a grander vision, one where time wasn't measured but revered, not displayed but entrusted to the keeping of earth and memory. The secrecy of ancient buried clocks didn't vanish with the sands of time. It evolved, weaving itself into the very fabric of modern horology. Consider the exquisite craftsmanship of Renaissance-era clockmakers, who built intricate astronomical clocks for royal courts, often encasing their mechanisms in locked cabinets or hidden compartments. These weren't just feats of engineering, they were direct descendants of the Babylonian star charts and Egyptian water clocks, their complexity reserved for elite eyes. The same impulse that drove priests to bury celestial devices beneath temples now fueled guilds to guard their designs with sworn oaths, ensuring their innovations remained exclusive. The difference, instead of sand, they used patents and vaults. Fast forward to the 18th century, when marine chronometers revolutionized navigation. These precision instruments were so vital to national security that Britain's Board of Longitude treated them like state secrets, their inner workings protected as fiercely as any buried Mayan calendar. Clockmaker John Harrison's H4 chronometer, capable of determining longitude at sea, was dismantled and studied behind closed doors, not unlike the Antikythera mechanism being concealed in its lead box. The parallels are striking. Both devices were breakthroughs too powerful to risk falling into rival hands, their creators torn between sharing progress and safeguarding advantage. Today, this legacy thrives in the world of haute horlogerie. Luxury watchmakers like Patek Philippe or Audemars Piguet produce secret watches timepieces with hidden dials or reverso cases that flip to conceal their faces, echoing the dual-purpose sundials of Mesopotamia. Limited edition releases sell out instantly, not just for their craftsmanship but for their exclusivity, mirroring the way ancient elites hoarded celestial knowledge. Even the concept of complications in modern watches functions like perpetual calendars or moon phase indicators can be traced back to the Mayan priests who buried devices tracking Venus cycles. The more intricate the mechanism, the more it whispers of those early timekeepers who believed some truths were too profound to display. Yet the most poignant connection lies in our cultural psyche. Just as ancient societies buried clocks to honor time's sacred weight, modern collectors stash rare watches in safes, treating them less as tools and more as talismans. The buried star clocks of Carthage and the vault-protected tourbillons of Switzerland share a common thread. Timekeeping at its highest level has always been about more than mere measurement. It's about control, reverence, and the unspoken pact between humanity and eternity. The next time you glance at a smartphone or a sundial, remember the shadows on its face stretch back millennia, cast by devices that taught us to both chase time and kneel before it. Historians have spent decades poring over these buried timekeepers, and yet the question remains, why conceal such marvels? The academic world is split, with theories clashing like gears in an overwound clock. On one side, pragmatic scholars point to environmental factors. Bronze mechanisms left exposed to desert winds or tropical rains would corrode within generations, while those tucked beneath layers of dry soil or sealed tombs survived millennia. A water clock unearthed near Thebes, its internal channels still pristine, supports this view. Its burial may have been less about secrecy and more about preservation, like locking a library to protect fragile scrolls. Yet spiritual interpretations refused to be silenced. When archaeologists found Mayan calendar wheels smeared with sacrificial resin, their glyphs aligned to Venus cycles, it suggested these weren't just stored, they were ceremonially retired, returned to the earth like offerings to the gods. Ritual deposits in Celtic bogs, where sundials were placed alongside swords bent beyond use, hint at a similar practice, timekeeping devices killed to release their power. Even the Antikythera mechanism's marine burial fuel speculation was its loss an accident, or a deliberate consignment to Poseidon's keeping. Political theories add another layer of intrigue. The broken seal on a Babylonian star clock's clay casing, discovered in the ruins of a conquered city, implies it was hidden during invasion. Perhaps rulers buried clocks not to honor them, but to deny rivals access to the celestial knowledge that legitimized their rule. This wasn't just about safeguarding technology, it was about controlling the narrative of time itself. Chinese court records describe emperors executing astronomers for leaking eclipse predictions, proof that temporal knowledge was power and power demanded secrecy. The most compelling debates swirl around devices that defy categorization. Take the Carthaginian star discs, their holes mismatched with known constellations. Were they flawed or deliberately encrypted? Some researchers propose these weren't clocks at all, but ritual objects mimicking celestial patterns, meaning their burial wasn't concealment, but part of their function. Similarly, Norse frost dials found in bogs may have been less timekeepers than ceremonial markers, their runes tracking not hours but mythic cycles. What unites these disputes is their refusal to settle. every new discovery a clock buried with a child in Anatolia, a shattered astrolabe in a Moorish well challenges old assumptions. Perhaps the truth isn't in choosing one explanation, but in holding them all at once. Like the interlocking gears of the Antikythera mechanism, these theories spin together, each turn revealing fresh mysteries. After all, time was never simple to those who first measured it. Why should its secrets be? In the bustling agora of Athens or the sun-drenched plazas of Rome, public sundials stood as symbols of shared time, their shadows inching across numbered stones for all to see. These communal timekeepers served farmers heading to market, merchants closing deals, and citizens rushing to assemblies time democratized, available to any who could read the sun's arc. Yet beneath this veneer of accessibility lay a stark truth. The truly sophisticated devices, the water clocks that ticked through moonless nights, the geared mechanisms predicting eclipses, were never meant for the public eye. They were tucked away in temple sanctuaries, royal libraries, or the sealed tombs of elites, their existence known only to those who wielded power. This duality wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate stratagem, a way to maintain control over time's most potent secrets. Consider the grand sundial of Augustus in Rome's Campus Martius, its massive obelisk casting shadows across a marble pavement etched with zodiac signs. To the average citizen, it marked the hours and seasons, a practical marvel. But historians now suspect it doubled as a political calendar, its alignments signaling auspicious days for imperial decrees or military campaigns. The real calculations, though, happened behind closed doors. Court astrologers used portable bronze mechanisms, ancestors of the Antikythera device, to refine these public markers with celestial precision. The message was clear: you could know the hour, but never the deeper rhythms that shaped your fate. This divide between public and private timekeeping mirrored societal hierarchies. In Egypt, the flooding of the Nile dictated the agricultural cycle, a rhythm every farmer understood. Yet the water clocks predicting the flood's arrival were hidden in temple crypts, their calibrations guarded by priests who alone could interpret the god's will. Similarly, medieval monastic orders rang bells to regulate daily life for surrounding villages, while their mechanical horologer, early weight-driven clocks, ticked in cloistered halls, measuring canonical hours too sacred for lay ears. Time, it seems, was always meted out in doses, its full measure reserved for those at the top. The tension between accessibility and control flared most vividly during moments of upheaval. When peasant revolts rocked 14th-century Europe, rebels often targeted public clock towers, seeing them as instruments of feudal oppression, their chimes dictating work hours down to the minute. In response, authorities moved advanced clockmaking knowledge into guild-protected workshops, much like Babylonian priests had once buried eclipse almanacs beneath ziggurats. Even the language of timekeeping reflected this divide. Latin's hora gave us hour, but its cousin, horologum, referred to secretive timekeeping devices, a lexical split echoing the gap between communal and clandestine time. Yet buried within this control lay a paradox. By hoarding advanced timekeeping, elites often stifled the very progress that could have solidified their power. The Islamic world's brilliant water clocks, described in manuscripts like Al-Jazari's Book of Knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices, rarely made it beyond palace walls. Had their designs spread, they might have revolutionized medieval science. Instead, like the Chinese emperor's sealed armillary spheres, they became curiosities rather than catalysts. The sand that swallowed so many private clocks didn't just hide their mechanisms, it buried potential, leaving societies to relearn what earlier minds had already mastered. What emerges from this divide is a pattern as old as civilization itself. timekeeping as both a public service and a private weapon. The sundial in the square offered the illusion of shared order, while the hidden gears and star charts whispered the truth that time, in its fullness, was never truly for everyone. It was a privilege, a burden, and above all, a secret, locked away in vaults or sunk in graves, waiting for an age that might finally bridge the gap between the time we see and the time we're meant to know. The sands that swallowed these ancient timekeepers still cling tightly to their most profound mysteries, while modern archaeology has pieced together fragments of the puzzle, gears from shipwrecks, glyphs from tomb walls. Whole chapters of this story remain buried. Take the legendary Clock of Ammon, described in Egyptian temple inscriptions, a device said to harness the Nile's currents to track celestial cycles with uncanny precision. Historians long dismissed it as myth until 2018, when radar scans near Luxor revealed hollow chambers beneath a ruined temple, their walls lined with copper piping that matches descriptions of the lost mechanism. Yet the chambers remain sealed, their contents shielded by 3,000 years of accumulated sediment and a labyrinth of traps described in hieroglyphs as the breath of the god who guards time. Equally tantalizing are the whispers from unexcavated Mayan sites. LiDAR scans in northern Guatemala recently uncovered a pyramid complex with underground chambers aligned to Venus's 8-year cycle. Local lore speaks of stone calendars that breathe, devices supposedly buried there to feed on celestial energy. Whether metaphorical or literal, these accounts suggest timekeeping technologies far beyond the rudimentary sundials and water clocks we've catalogued. Even the Antikythera mechanism, once considered a Hellenistic anomaly, may have kin waiting to be found. Marine archaeologists now suspect a sister shipwreck lies off Crete's coast, its cargo hold potentially housing another geared marvel, one that could reveal whether such devices were singular masterpieces or part of a broader tradition of mechanical astronomy. The unanswered questions multiply with each discovery. Why did some cultures bury intact clocks while others shattered them ritually? What explains the global pattern of hiding celestial devices underground, from Scandinavian bogs to Andean peaks? And most hauntingly, did these civilizations know something about time's nature that we've yet to rediscover? A 2022 study of Babylonian eclipse tablets revealed something startling. Their predictions account for celestial slowdowns that modern physics only confirmed in the 20th century. How did ancient astronomers detect phenomena invisible without telescopes? Future excavations might hold the keys. In Iraq, drought-receded riverbanks have exposed previously submerged ziggurates where cuneiform tablets hint at star clocks of the underworld. Meanwhile, advances in quantum imaging could soon let us scan sealed Egyptian sarcophagi without opening them, potentially revealing timekeeping devices placed near mummies' heads to guide their journey through eternity. Even DNA analysis plays a role. Researchers now trace the origins of bronze alloys in recovered clocks, hoping their chemical fingerprints will lead to undiscovered workshops. Perhaps the greatest revelation lies in what we haven't found. The absence of surviving clocks from certain periods suggests purposeful destruction, like the missing moon wheels of Celtic druids, described in Roman texts as disassembled and scattered to the winds to prevent profanation. Every void in the archaeological record whispers of lost knowledge, of devices too revolutionary or too sacred to survive their era. As robotic probes map uncharted caverns beneath Mesoamerican pyramids and AI deciphers faded ink on recycled medieval parchments, we stand on the brink of rewriting history. The next shovel strike or sonar ping could unveil a device that shatters our assumptions, proving ancient timekeeping was never primitive, just profoundly, intentionally obscured. What waits beneath the soil isn't merely metal and stone, but a challenge to modernity's arrogance. These buried clocks were never just tools. They were testaments to civilizations that saw time as a force to be reckoned with, not just measured. As technology peels back layers of earth and centuries of silence, we may finally hear their ticking not as echoes of the past, but as messages meant for the